Right, welcome back to African Voices. As you were watching earlier on, we were just discussing about what Mr. Sibanda asked, whether George Weah's presidency is going to be a transformative and a successful one. But unfortunately, our two guests, one of them decided not to go clearly, whereas Pastor Bazzie has told us clearly he's going to be successful. Sibanda, I'll pass that back to you.
I'll put Pastor Bazzie on the spot here. Already, and this is a point that Taylor raised, Mr. Already we know that one of the first few decisions that President George Weah has made has had to be reversed. And it's not just that. When you say decision has been reversed, you were saying earlier that shows that he's listening to his advisor and so forth. But somebody else would argue that shows that his decision-making process isn't intact, isn't working as good as it should. You can't be making a mistake so early. But hold that thought. You can't be making a mistake so early. That's one argument. But here's the other side of the story. Charles Gibson, the Minister of Justice that's been withdrawn, in fact has a history that's clear for everybody. Yeah, he has been sued in the courts for corruption or instances of corruption. Clearly when President George Weah appointed him, made this appointment, he was aware of these things. Why was he ignoring that? Is he going to be successful if he ignores somebody's history like that?
Well, I'd like President Weah to tell us why he knows that. But I think, from my own understanding, this is a coalition. This is a government that is forming, and have come from another successful government that has been criticized for many reasons. And I do understand that we always criticize leadership, particularly the outgoing is always the bad one, and the incoming is always great. And sometimes we have to give them a chance to prove themselves to be right. But we all know that Ellen Johnson did extremely well, looking at where she took us from and coming to this platform. I would say it's earlier to make decisions, but listening to the people is better for me to see that we go back and do it right than to continue and be stubborn and say, look, I'm not going to change because I've said this, and carry on making the mistake. So I think if listening...
Pastor Bazzie, the idea that he would change his mind and listen is great. But the question is, President George Weah has got a university degree. President George Weah hasn't just landed from the moon. He's been around in Liberia, and he knows Charles Gibson's history. He knows who is who, and that's what his job is, to get the best to get the best people around him, so that his agenda should succeed. Why didn't he just get that? Why did it need pressure from society in order to make a decision that seems to me to have been a decision that should have been made from the get-go? Why did he need that? Are we seeing here an endemic African political practice where you're only appointing people to positions because somehow you owe something, rather than somebody thinking, look at Magufuli in Tanzania, clearly making decisions that you see are gut decisions, but are guided by a simple principle. I want to try to do it right the first time round, and I do not care what I lose. Why couldn't President George Weah do that? Isn't that a red sign?
Well, that is not a red sign for me. I think President Weah clearly said that the politics we want in Liberia is open politics. We want to make sure that we are working together and making mistakes and correcting ourselves together and moving on as a country. So this is a decision that he made initially, which was going to be confirmed and he took it back to make sure that he said he's listening to people. From the conversation that they had, he's going to withdraw that decision. So I still think that is a good start. I wouldn't take that too negative, because a good start is about listening and making sure that whoever is coming in is the will of the people. So if he has made another decision and we look at it and think, well, something may have been in the heading, now it's out, it's better we start again and do it right than to carry on and say, look, I don't want to be seen as the weak person, let's continue. In the end, it's going to be more damaging than what he has done. So I still commend him for that, coming back and say, look, I got it wrong, let's do it right. And I think we grow that way.
Okay, let's say we agree with you for the meantime, because like you said, it's good to make up a mistake and correct it quickly than wait until later when it's too bad. But Prince, if I can bring you back in, we've got about 16 indigenous ethnicities in the country.
Yeah.
And to satisfy all those ethnicities is going to be a very, very difficult one.
Right.
But one will argue as well, if you look at the vice president, you know, who is President George Weah's vice president, there are lots of controversies that surrounds her as well. So you as a diasporan who lives in this country, what's your take on the current vice president, being that everybody knew who she was or who she was connected with, but George Weah still elected, chose her to be his vice president, and we all, I will say, the history that's surrounding her, but the people still supported George Weah and still voted for George Weah.
Well, one of the things I want you to clarify, if you say controversies, it would be helpful to clarify some of those controversies, because clearly, from what I know, that she comes from an institution or a constituent of popularity. And George Weah played this game very well, where he tried to look at the demographics, and that's what I was trying to give the premise of the Liberian political landscape, where you have the number of people that are eligible voters that actually make decisions such as what we've got today. Jewel Howard Taylor come from a constituency. If you look at the country, for example, from Lofa and Bong, they hold, besides Maserati, a huge proportion of the population that votes. So yes, he was connected with Charles Taylor. Charles Taylor was loved by the people that voted him. Many will argue that, well, he got elected because they were afraid and didn't want any further war. So those are issues that can be debated. People still argue about the standard of life that they have on there. Coming to your point about the controversies, I don't know about one that you probably will have to enlighten my mind on what controversies you think surround Jewel Howard. But I think she's a daughter of the soil. She's an educated woman. She's one of those women who's always fought for women's rights, and she stood her ground and has supported George Weah to see Liberia transform. You were talking about transformation, and basically to see a new style of Liberia. You were asking earlier whether we're going to have another woman's president. Who knows where it stands? She's in a political limelight, just as any other man, and I think her role remains as such, unless you define it otherwise to say, well, these are issues. Where do you stand with these specific, controversial?
Well, I'll just make it clear, like you said. When I say controversies, I mean, like as you said, during the first election, i.e., when Charles Taylor won. Like you just mentioned, a lot of people were saying they voted for Charles Taylor, or people would say people voted for Charles Taylor because they were scared or that kind of thing. But knowing that she is the former wife of President Taylor, or former president, where she got married to Charles Taylor in 1997 and got divorced in 2006. She was like the first lady of the country. And Charles Taylor is connected to lots of controversies surrounding the West African coast, i.e. Sierra Leone and Guinea, which is debatable, But we're focusing on Liberia. In terms of what happened in Liberia as well, do you think she might be clear or innocent?
I don't know about any issues that Jewel Howard is connected to for which we will pin her down. All I can tell you, she's a popular person. If you go into her Bon County constituents, she's done several projects. She's contributed immensely doing her role as a senator while she was in the House of Senate. So those are reasons why people thought she would be someone that they can look up to for leadership. And just I think, sensed that from a distance to say, you know what? To be able to succeed in this thing, I can't do it on my own. I'll need people who got credibility, people who got the votes, people who can be trusted. And I think it is from those decisions that George Weah chose Jewel Howard. And I stand to be corrected, but I think she enjoyed those privileges today. George Weah confides in her, and that's why they are working. There may be arguments that coalition is not working, but things I know. I heard someone send me an article about one of the MPP former chairman, the chairman emeritus, Cyril Allen mentioning, he clearly said, jobs were not issues that were debated or were on the table when it came to the coalition. So what I can say to you, it's too early to begin to analyze the future of the coalition or their leadership. All I can say is George Weah needs support. He needs advice. He needs to listen. He needs to connect and not only base his decision on appointing leaders or people to position based on friendship or partisanship. It is about the country. The country needs to develop. He needs to make sure that he taps into the limited human resources that we've got there. I've come from a human resource background, and I know how important it is to retain people that have got those key and cardinal skills that you need to be able to move the country forward. There are issues at the moment about appointments into different ministries and agencies, people who haven't got that qualification, but they've been stewards of the CDC and want to be rewarded. I can understand where he comes from. There are different pressure. And so you ask the question about the prospect of him succeeding and where he comes from. And that's where I asked him if he's going to reward those partisans, whether they are qualified or competent to hold a role for now, and maybe doing it in the short term. How much damage would that do to our economy, to our country, before he realizes that indeed he could formulate a program to be able to help these?
I think you've been talking politics so long. Now you're talking proper development. I think we're getting there now. I think that it is important to recognize what you've just said, that politically maybe he's making some difficult political decisions and appointing people, because actually that's how his coalition had to work. That's how he has to get elected. And I agree that in politics you do not necessarily do the right thing all the time. Sometimes you play according to the rules of the game now in order to change those rules. Perhaps if you say to me, he's appointing these people because that's what got him into power, that he got his vice president because that's what would make his coalition electable. I can understand. There are many considerations. For example, he had to appoint somebody who was female because, of course, the president who just left was a female. So you got to look like you're sensitive to those issues, and you understand, and you don't want to break with that past. I understand those modalities, practicalities. But what I think we should be worried about, and I think we should begin to think about, is exactly where you are pushing towards your contribution, which is that you understand your realities, you know what ought to be, but you live currently the world as it is, hoping that because you're there, you're going to push it towards the ought, towards the desired position. But one of the things that I think we should actually talk about here, which is not just a Liberian question, which is in many ways an African question, which is in many ways a global question. Seeing the world is drifting. You can talk about Donald Trump and how he got elected, and we're going to have different theories. But one of the things that I think is important, especially for Africa, given that Africa is coming from behind, it's trying to catch up from behind, is that every time a new president gets elected or comes into power, it doesn't matter how in Africa, even if they come to power through the barrel of the gun, as Zimbabweans have just said, a president through the threat of war. Even if it comes to power through an outright coup, you will have millions and millions of people that celebrate and say the things that you have been saying here. But let's stand behind our government. Let's be patriotic. Let's move forward, and that let's support this president. Does supporting your country, sometimes does supporting an African country, sometimes including going in outright opposition to that government from day one, is that patriotic? Or do you consider patriotism to be just us saying we need to agree with this government for the first 4 weeks, even if they're going the wrong direction? Or is it patriotic sometimes can you practice patriotism by opposing your government?
Well, patriotism can come in different forms and shape. It's about you realizing what the outcome of your patriotic movement will bring. For example, we have the outcome of civil conflict that led us to a situation that we wish, if we knew, we probably would not have gone into. You have to redefine what one will call being patriotic. But I think the true definition of patriotism is loving your country and ensuring that that love for your country will move for the good of the people or for your country, and not just being that selfish interest to call yourself I'm patriotic because you're looking for some selfish gain. And so patriotism is about going beyond. Supporting our president is one thing, and that's where we come. You have to respect the will of the people, and that's democracy. Now we've got an elected president. If you are a true patriot, you need to support him wherever possible. You need to criticize him constructively to be able to bring the right result. You don't necessarily have to be in government, but make sure that you speak the right thing, not speaking because you want to get into government, but making sure you highlight those things that are key to the growth of our country. And I'm sure if he's one who's a good listener, he'll listen and know that you're telling the truth.
So based on, Sibanda, based on what you've just mentioned, and as you and I will know, because what you've just said is exactly the way it goes in Africa, whereas sometimes people support it just for supporting sake or just for their own interests.
Which is wrong.
Which is wrong, you know. But let's be clear here, because if I can just move the topic for a bit, because we've got less than 5 minutes. You, from the diaspora, Liberia does not accept dual citizenship. And many of you in this country and other parts of the world were not allowed to vote due to that law not allowing people who has got dual citizenship to vote or to stand as a Liberian president or as a candidate. So what you guys who are in the diaspora, what do you want to see Mr. Weah do? Because I've seen few articles where he has started talking about that. Is that like a sign of a good change because he started to talk about that, Pastor Bazzie?
Yeah, well, great. Sorry, Pastor Bazzie has asked me to kindly
comment Any of you can comment on
issue. That's one of the great things I admire. One of the first things that we have done and I admire. You need to look at the benefits of dual citizenship. Asking people, it didn't make sense to have us, even though it's enshrined in our constitution that if you've got citizenship of another country, you cannot be a citizen of Liberia, which I think needed correction. And he's come forth in the right direction to welcome citizenship and not only stopping there, but in fact opening the door to anyone who wants to be a citizen of Liberia. The issue that I have, though, is that of land reform. Clearly, there should be boundaries. Even in this country, you cannot buy land here. You can be citizen here, and if you misbehave, that citizenship can be stripped of you. And so it is across the world. Citizenship is about to give that opportunity so people can have leverage in delivering development and contributing their quota, making them to feel being part of the system. But there are limits to everything. Every rule has an exception. So I will ask President Weah today, great. We all want to be going home if we have citizenship of other countries. In fact, I'm born in Liberia. If you tell me, say, well, I'm not a Liberian, I go in and go to my village, you can't stop me from going to pick my plantain and bitter ball from the farm. If you stop me from working in your government for political reason, fair enough, forgetting the remittancy that a country benefits from people from the diaspora. But when it comes to land reform, there should be a hard thinking about that. I'm not saying people from the West or people of Western orientation or background should not contribute there, but if they want to invest in our land, they can lease the land for a limited time, but not forever, not buying the land to own it. If they want to lease the land, maybe to have a farm, they can do that. Yeah. But I will oppose strongly, to the strongest extent, to sell land to anyone from the world because we want to be inclusive.
Are these Pastor Bazzie, are these some of these decisions that President George Weah is making, including the land question that Mr. Taylor is raising here, questions that sort of fall into this category of things that he's doing that suggest that perhaps as a former international footballer, he lacks political depth, he lacks political philosophy, and isn't that part of the African problem where you have leaders that have the support, no matter how they get it, but lack in terms of political, some political home philosophy. Everybody, if you speak to anybody, even Donald Trump, disagree with him all you want, he's got a political philosophy, which is that you've got to make America great, America first, America this, America that. But President George Weah doesn't seem to have exposed an awareness of a political philosophy that will guide his sociology as he tries to run a country. Running a country isn't a simple thing. You don't do it with administrators, you do it with ideas. First, you must have an idea. Administrators help facilitate, help you implement that idea. President George Weah seems not to have an idea what he wants Liberia to be.
If you tell me prior to his arrival in politics, he didn't have idea in the arena, I would say, okay. But from the time he been in Liberia, he developed himself. And let's just come quickly to dual citizenship. I travel around the world and I see and hear diasporas talking about carrying investment in their own country. But that's the issue because they are not allowed because of the dual citizenship issue. And I think I agree with the land reform situation, but people should be given the opportunity to invest. I want to carry opportunities and projects into Liberia, but there's a limitation, even though I'm a born and bred Liberian, but we should be able to give opportunity for people like myself to go and do so. But I think that's a presumption.
selling land to anybody who has the money, that's very important. There should be a boundary.
There should be a boundary. We don't want to sell land to anybody because of the money.
President George Weah seems to be slightly empty on philosophical questions. But you also have agree here?
You also have to understand that George Weah has...
I don't want to understand, Pastor.
Yes.
Let's be clear. His political philosophy is lacking in this respect.
No, that's a presumption.
Are you going to find anywhere in the world where somebody comes into power and is interested in just pleasing everybody, saying all the nice things in the world, and doesn't have a political base, a political grounding that says there are things you can and things you can't do?
Well,
in life,
if that's the case, that happens all over Africa.
That's the question. And if we have these new presidents, we must have people who have some philosophy. Yeah. People who say, no matter what the situation is, there are things I can and things I can't do. There are things we should and things we shouldn't do. There are things we can sell, things we can't sell. Okay? That should be a basic grounding that should identify a politician as a politician. And this politician here seems, at least with this first very important policy that you raised, seems to be empty. We've run out of time, but I think it's an important subject and we can pick a day to look at it another time.
Thank you very much.
Definitely. We've run out of time, but it's been a pleasure, guys, having you on this important topic, talking about Liberia and George Weah. All we can say, we wish Mr. Weah the best of luck. We hope he will be one of the great examples of Africa, where Africa will be ruled by good leaders. Thank you for watching. Until next week, you have a great night.